This is a lovely simple little recipe, oatcakes. Now, a traditional Scottish treat, but I'm just changing a little few things in the recipe. Normally you might use a bit normal plain flour in this recipe. I'm going to use a little bit of spelt flour. And likewise, I'm just using a normal rolled oat. And instead of what might be usually used as butter, just a small, about 50 ml of this, I'm going to use a little bit of coconut oil. I'll leave the recipe up for this one, and also just 6 ingredients: baking flour, salt, coconut oil, oats, spelt. That's it. And a little bit of extra spelt to just roll them out. But let's just very quickly talk about oats and why oats are so good in an anti-inflammatory diet. They're a wonderful ingredient. Oats are very high in a soluble fibre, beta-glycan. And this soluble fibre is marvellous stuff, because it's very effective at even reducing cholesterol, as with all soluble fibres. Because the way soluble fibre works is your liver produces, in an organ called the gallbladder, produces a substance called bile. Now, bile is needed for the digestion of fats. But the interesting thing with this is that soluble fibre tends to clump in your small intestine with bile, and then that gets rinsed out through your normal going to the toilet kind of processes. But your body then needs to make more bile to be able to digest more fats. But bile is made out of cholesterol. So then what your body does is it goes into your bloodstream, pulls cholesterol out of your bloodstream directly to make more bile, and hence the end result, it lowers down your cholesterol. So that's just one thing that oats give. They're also a whole grain, and as with many whole grains, or all whole grains pretty much, it's very, very beneficial for your gut bacteria. Oats are particularly high in folate, they're high in magnesium, they're high in copper, so they've got a good spectrum of minerals as well within them. So there's many, many benefits to eating these beautiful soluble fibre, versatile grains. And again, bringing them into your diet is so easy through porridge, things like these oat cakes. Very, very they're just such a versatile ingredient, so easy to have in the cupboard. You know, if you're a little, and porridge doesn't have to be for breakfast, you know, loaded up with fruits and so on. But oats are wonderful. So I'm going to keep going and just show you how to briefly make these oat cakes. So first of all, I'm going to mix my dry ingredients with this. So into a bowl, I'm going to add my oats. I'm going to add spelt flour. I'm going to add my baking powder. And I'm going to add a pinch of salt. I'm using a potassium salt in this, as opposed to a sodium salt. I just find it's better for the old blood pressure. I'm a bit predisposed to that. So I'm just going to mix around those dry ingredients. Now, once I've got my dry ingredients mixed together, what I'm going to do now is add, very simply, my wet ingredients. About 40 ml in about, you might have to adjust it up a little bit if you find your oats are a little bit on the dry side, but about 40 ml of tepid water goes in there. And I'm going to, again, you could use butter is what's traditionally used in this. I'm going to use a bit of coconut oil, the equivalent amount. And I'm just going to now mix my wet ingredients through my oats, just to kind of form into a nice batter, or into a nice kind of a pastry, if you like. Now with this, it's sometimes the best thing to do is get your hands in there to kind of form it into the kind of cake mixture, and kind of pushing it together into a kind of a dough, for want of a better description. So when my dough is just nice pushed together, I'm just going to form that into, you know, kind of form it together into like a pastry, if you like. Pastry as opposed to a dough might be a better description. And then I just have a little bit of extra spelt flour if I need it. I'm finding this isn't sticking. And you just want this nice kind of firm texture. If it's a little bit dry, you could add a little bit more water onto it. But I'm going to, that just looks about right to me there. So I'm going to just nice and gently roll that down, kind of holding it together. Now traditionally you'd use a cookie cutter on this, and you'd cut it into these nice neat little cakes with the cutter, and then you could just rework it and do it like that. I'm just going to, because again I'm not really making it that traditional because I've used coconut oil as opposed to butter, but I'm just going to cut them into little triangles and nice neat little shapes, and then pop them onto my silicone mat. So I'm just going to form those into kind of a nice little square. Again, if you want to do it more traditional, again, just use a little cutter. But again, I'm just keeping it nice and simple for myself. So what I'm going to do is now, when I've rolled them down into a kind of a nice thin little base, I've got a silicone mat here, so I don't really need to do any more treatment with that mat. I'm just going to form these up a little bit, and then I'm just going to cut them into little squares, or else I could cut them into little triangles. So again, you don't have to be too fussy with them. I kind of like that kind of eclectic kind of feel to cookies and things like that, not looking too kind of regimentally kind of exact, because it's kind of nice nowadays sometimes getting things that just look a little bit, you know, homemade, just a little bit rough and ready, for want of a better description. Different shapes and so on, just looks a little bit more natural almost. So I'm going to pop these randomly shaped cookies onto my little silicone mat. Now sometimes what you could do with these is you could allow them to dry a little bit. You know, even leave them overnight before baking them, and they'll dry and you'll find that they'll bake quite easily. But there's our little oatcakes, which are a great carrier for cheeses or things like that. And I'm going to just put a little sprinkling of spelt flour on top. I like the spelt flour because again it's a more older grain. It is a gluten containing grain, but it's just got a nicer texture. It's more of a whole grain, so I just think it adds a little bit more to these than a traditional plain flour. And now I'm just going to bake those in the oven for about 20 minutes. I actually find about 178 degrees, slightly below the 180 degrees, and kind of half dry them, half bake them. They usually take about 20 minutes. So I'm going to pop those in the oven, and I'll give you the exact time when I take them out. And after 20 minutes baking at 178 to 180 degrees, thereabouts, there we have it, our oat bit cakes, all ready for whatever toppings you'd like. And again, traditionally cut into circles, but like this, they're lovely. And again, just let them cool down a little bit before using, and you could store them in an airtight container and they last very, very well as well for a few days as well.